Follow the money.
That's what I always say. You always follow the money.
Yeah.
This is Follow the Money with Mitch Moss and Paulie Howard on VSiN.
Paul getting some well-deserved vacation. Stormy, Buonantony, and Jonathan Von Tobel in their stead as we welcome you back to Follow the Money live at downtown Las Vegas, Circa Resort and Casino. Excited to dive into a little college football here as our friend Chris the Bear Fallica joins us on the Progressive Guest Line. Fox Sports Betting Analyst, the Bear Bets Podcast, and Big Noon Kickoff will be back before we know it. You starting to get excited? The season's almost here.
I am. I'm already looking for an Ohio State, Texas week one, a rematch of that great semifinal. So what a way to kick the year off in Columbus with the national champs and the team they beat along the way. It should be an awesome game. And now that we're mid-July, like Open Championship this week, once the Open Championship is done, like football, all in for me.
All right, well, let's start with that Texas team because obviously going to be a very popular pick, but like retooling, we'll say, in some key position groups, especially on offense. What do we make of their win total and their expectations here? 9.5 at some spots, shaded to the over pretty highly.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously that first game of the year in Ohio State is kind of the toss-up. I can make a case either way with them. I would lean towards the under. I think Sark and that coaching staff are pretty confident, but the schedule kind of flips from what it was a year ago. We don't know how good Arch Manning is going to be. We think he's going to be good, but right now all we know is the family name. You look at what they lost at wide receiver. We look at the offensive line, that situation they lost. We look at some of the defenders they lost. Like the Red River game, certainly. We'll see what happens there. OU, we don't know what way they're going to go. But Ohio State, OU, at Florida, at Georgia, the A&M game, and who knows what's going to happen with Marcel Reed by that point in the year. The Aggies could be a very dangerous team. Like, as good as Texas is, like, they could be in a situation kind of just like Ole Miss or Alabama were last year, maybe sitting there 9-3 and being like, we're a really good team, but you've got 3 losses, so where do we stand? So I would lean towards the under 9.5 there with Texas. When in doubt, I always kind of lean towards the non-public, more contrarian, more baseline type feel.
And it is plus 140 on the under. I appreciate you and, quite frankly, Arch Manning himself at SEC Media Days today acknowledging, hey, I haven't really done anything yet. He said, quote, I've only played, 2 games? It's nice to say, but it doesn't mean anything. Yes, 100%. And that probably comes with the lineage too, right? Keeping that level head and knowing what you have ahead of you. Sticking with the theme of the SEC, I know there are a couple of those more middling teams that you did have interest on their win totals one way or another. Let's start with South Carolina, because that's a team at least I personally am pretty high on. I love Lenora Sellers as a potential Heisman candidate this year. How do you see the Gamecocks?
Well, you're probably not going to like me so much after this, because I am.
They do have a tough schedule.
They do. I'm under 7.5. Remember, this is a team last year that really wasn't thought to be very good. Their win total last year was like 5.5. And they're sitting there 3-3, and I'm like, oh, the under is going to be cake here. And then Sellers and that defense just got incredibly hot, and they won out, and they were one of the best teams in the country by the end of the year. But we talked about Sellers for sure, and could be a top 5 pick come next year in the draft. I know he's gotten a lot of hype, but you got major losses on defense with Kennard and Minowari. All the linebackers are gone. The interior of the defensive line is gone. And again, I know this is all baked into the number with the number at 7.5, but all 4 of their road games are potentially losable. Missouri, LSU, Ole Miss, and A&M. They got an opener against Virginia Tech in Atlanta, and who knows where the Hokies are going to be at that point in the year. They host Oklahoma, they host Alabama, they host Clemson. So that's like 8 games where you could say, oh yeah, you wouldn't be shocked if they lost any of those. So to go 4-4 in those 8 games, to get to 8-4 to beat me, I'm willing to take my chance there. So I love Shane Beamer. I have a relationship with him, but I'm under, unfortunately, this year on South Carolina.
All right, I want to stay in this conference because there's a team here near the top that I am very conflicted on. And I want your opinion because I think I trust your eye more than mine. I don't think Gunnar Stockton's a good quarterback, but I also think I've seen 101 dropbacks in his entire career. So I don't think it's fair to label him as such. What do we make of Georgia as we head into this year?
It was funny. I was texting with a couple of people the other night, and the question literally was, can Gunnar Stockton play, or is this going to be a problem all year long? And the guy I texted, who has been around the program and covers him and says, I've seen him at practice. The kid can play. So I think maybe we're judging him maybe a little unfairly off of getting thrown into the fire in the college football playoff last year. I think someone else brought it up today where I think maybe even Kirby Smart was saying, I got like 50 guys on my team who are either in their first or second year. That schedule is absolutely brutal. But again, I think at this point now, I think you just kind of have to trust Kirby Smart and trust the program he's built and trust the players that he's brought in. I think nothing between 8-4 and 12-0 would really surprise anyone. It's probably obviously going to be somewhere in between, but people close to the program tell me Gunnar Stockton can play. So I'm kind of just willing to bank on what they're saying and they see out there. So I am higher on Georgia because of that. Just the trust and familiarity I have with that program, knowing that Kirby Smart isn't going to throw a bad product on the field. I think the bigger issue for Georgia is kind of reestablishing a dominant offensive line and a dominant running game, because that was something last year that the program really struggled with. A lot of injuries on the offensive line, a lot of injuries at running back. So if they can get back to that, that will obviously be the biggest help that they can possibly give Stockton.
Talking college football win totals with Chris the Bear Fallica, who joins us on the Progressive guest line. Let's shift out of the SEC a little bit. One team I've heard a handful of people say they think could be the Indiana of last year, including your colleague at Fox Sports and Joel Klatt, and that's Illinois. Their season win total is 7.5. Are you on board with that thought process?
I am not thinking that they are a college football playoff contender. And there are places out there that threw an 8.5 minus 150 out there as well. So that I like a whole lot. I would still take under 7.5 at the plus money. I just like being able to get the little extra game buffer and pay a little bit extra juice. So look, I think the losses that they had at wide receiver, how does that affect Luke Altmaier? The running backs haven't been able to stay healthy in their time in Champaign. Rebuilt defensive line. You look at what they did last year, and they went 9-3 in the regular season, and you got a couple of overtime wins against Nebraska and a dreadful Purdue game thrown in there. The Kansas game early in the year, Kansas just imploded in the red zone with turnovers. You got a miracle win at Rutgers. So like those games right there, they were that close to being 5-7 last year. So how do we view them if that Rutgers miracle doesn't happen at the end of the year? You look at their 5 games immediately on the schedule that appear to be losable. Sneaky opener at Duke now with Darian Mensah, that great Tulane quarterback, now the quarterback in Durham. They go to Indiana, they got USC, they got Ohio State, and they go to Washington. And who knows where Wisconsin is doing late in the year as well. I'm not necessarily high on the Badgers, but maybe that's a win one for Luke Fickell, beat our old coach type of deal. So playoff aside, I don't think that's happening. I think 9 wins is a real stretch for this team, and if they get to 8, I think that's an accomplishment. So I'm willing to play the under 7.5 at plus money, but if you could find that 8.5 and lay a little extra juice, I'm very high on that.
So, Chris, in my free time, I am a Jehovah's Witness of football in that I'll go door to door. And instead of asking people if they want to talk about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, it's Devin Dampier. Are you with me? Would you spend a couple of minutes with me to talk about Utah, Devin Dampier, what this team could be this year?
Well, yeah, if you look at Kyle Whittingham, he is. Last year he was really, really high on his team, and then they had every single injury imaginable. Obviously, Cam Rising couldn't stay healthy again. The offensive line was hurt, couldn't run the ball, but he loves his offensive line this year. And I think his plan all along was kind of to have a great year last year and go out a winner, maybe win the conference and then retire. He came back, and that tells me a lot. That tells me that he really likes this team, and it's a very winnable type league. I mean, we talked last year at length about how you could make an argument that 7 or 8 teams could win the league and wind up being one of the teams that we didn't even talk about could wind up winning the league. So, yeah, I think Dampier now and that offense, and I think they're going to get back to their ability to really run the ball here with a good offensive line and maybe take some of that pressure Dampier from throwing the ball up. But, yeah, I like Utah. They should be the favorite to win the Big 12. Whether they do or not this year is another story. But, yeah, I like Utah a heck of a lot more to win the Big 12 than I do, say, Texas Tech, who's another team that seems to be getting a lot of hype. You talk about losable games, like they drew the worst possible road schedule that you could draw in the Big 12 with what they have. But yeah, I certainly favor Utah to win that league, and Houston is my long shot in there.
To follow up, Stormy and I have talked about this a couple of times. Do you think that's a one big lead or a league or two big league? How many teams do you think come out of the Big 12?
I think ultimately it is going to be a one big league, despite Brett Yormark's comments and hoping that it could be a two big league. I just think you're probably going to get, and again, it's an indictment on the league as to how good and deep the league is. Not that it's a bad league. It's what we just mentioned, like the difference, the drop off between Utah to Arizona State to Houston to Kansas State to Iowa, they're all kind of the same. So anybody could be anybody on any given Saturday in that league. So you could have a couple of 9-3 teams that are really good, and I just don't think 9-3 in the Big 12 is ultimately going to get you at that large. We saw Alabama, Ole Miss last year, South Carolina 9-3 from the SEC, and that didn't get you in. So I think ultimately, unfortunately for the Big 12, we are looking at a one big league.
Yeah, I think something that exemplifies that really well, honestly, is the win totals that you see in this league, where the lowest win total is 5.5 and the highest is 8.5. It's just because of that potential carnage that you can find within the league. Bear, as always, we thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it. And we're going to be bugging you a whole lot more before the season starts.
Please do. I look forward to it anytime. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Chris the Bear Fallica. Again,
Go
make sure you
Hawks.
check out the Bear Bets podcast. Such a fun group, especially with their gambling group chat. The Big 12 is going to be fun. I hope it's a two-bid league. I would love to see two of them get in. I'm such a big fan of the schools that are in that league.
I think it's a really great point by him, though. 9-3, Bama ain't making it in. I don't know if 9-3 Texas Tech is making it in.
All right. We're going to keep the college football talk rolling after the break with SEC Media Days rolling on in Atlanta. They say it just means more, but might it mean less for these season win totals? We'll be back.
This is Follow the Money on VSiN.
Ready to get in on the action? First Bet has you covered. Sign up now to access exclusive promotions and bet on hundreds of thrilling horse races every day right from your phone or computer. Visit firstbet.com. That's the number one, stbet.com, and use the promo code VSiN200. That'll score you a 20% rebate on all your wagers for the first 60 days up to $200. Don't miss out. Start betting today. Again, at firstbet.com. This is number one, stbet.com. Promo code VSiN200. And as we were talking about last segment a little bit with Chris the Bear Fallica, with SEC Media Days underway from Atlanta this week, thought that we would have a little fun talking through some different season win totals with it just means more or less. So I'm going to toss a handful of season win totals at you for the teams specifically that have been on the podium yesterday and today. See if you like their total over or under.
I throw them at you. Why does it have to be me?
Hold on, because this is my idea. This segment was my idea.
Right.
You don't get to just stranglehold my idea.
So then you would be great at this.
We're going to go back and forth on them anyways. But before we get into it, I did want to ask you, because I was kicking myself that I didn't get to ask Bear about it, and really appreciate his time and insights. But the comments from Greg McElroy yesterday on radio about Nick Saban, specifically saying that he talked to somebody who is, quote, very much in the know, and he trusts his source, that Nick Saban might return to coaching. And then Lane Kiffin also kind of doubled down on the sentiment, saying, quote, I don't think he's done. What that means necessarily, I don't know. I don't foresee him coming in like an assistant capacity. So what did you take from this when you heard that come out?
Okay, so McElroy has said that he has heard that he's considering coming back, because I'm reading a quote that says, I don't think he's coming back. And that's what McElroy said.
He personally said he doesn't think he's coming back, but he has been
gotcha.
told.
Sorry, I was confused there. Look, I'm fully aware that Nick Saban is the greatest college coach of all time, or maybe whatever, right? I think he is. He's 73. He is going to be 74 by the time he comes back, right? Maybe a little bit closer to 75. I fully admit that I am somewhat ageist, so I will say that I feel like returning at 75.
Sure.
Like, what are we doing?
Sure. And also, I mean, he still has an office at Alabama.
Yeah.
So he's still involved in the program with Kalen DeBoer and everything. I think he gets the fill that he needs to. he seems to enjoy College Game Day and all that other stuff that he's doing. So I don't know why you would need to or want to. You've already got all the national championships you could ask for.
I guess I can understand it to an extent. I mean, and to be fair, I've asked
that's been his whole life.
Right. And I have asked the same questions about what North Carolina's doing with Bill Belichick. Not Michael Lombardi. That's a great hire. But I will say that, like, let's say he comes back, not this year, obviously, but next year. How long are you getting him for? Are you jettisoning? Are you, like, handing over everything to a guy that's going to be there for 2 seasons? 3? Yeah. Maybe? Right? Till he's 78?
But to be fair, people were saying that about Pete Carroll with the Raiders, too. Like, do you really want to start over with a coach that's this old? Well, it's always a problem when you're citing someone's energy, okay? Yes. When every comment is like, but he's got so much energy. Dude, you would never know. Look at him chew that gum.
So, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because as I work part-time in local media here, around the time I got hired, I was doing some shifts for Raider Nation Radio. And I wanted to rip my ears out every time the word energy was brought up. And I'm with you. It's the equivalent of like when I think Tim has told the story on the air before where there was a minor leaguer that was selected high by I think the Nationals, and he would ask people like, "Oh, what's this guy like?" Like, great guy. And you're like, "Well, okay, I don't want to hear that about like the top prospect that we selected. I want to hear this dude is lacing 98-mile-an-hour dots and puts them wherever he wants." And that's the equivalent of old guy, great energy.
Or in dating, when you're like, "Oh yeah, you got to check out this girl. I think you'll really like her." And he's like, "Oh, is she hot? She's got a great personality." Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. It's just what is the answer? That tells you the answer. Okay, let's get into some of these season win totals nonetheless. We'll save Alabama for when they actually, being Kalen DeBoer and company, are on the podium. But LSU is another team that's kind of made headlines this week at Media Days. Brian Kelly talked about how talented his team is in 2025, and he said, "None of it matters, though, if they don't beat Clemson in the opener." Quote, "With the team we have this year, it's unacceptable for us not to play our very best in game one." That said, they are a 3-point dog in that game, so that result, at least an implied loss, when you look at the season win total at 8.5, it is juice minus 140 to the over. Thoughts on LSU here this season? I mean,
so it feels like we talk about this with LSU quite often, right? Which is, hey, big game to start the year. You better get this thing going on the right foot. And then it's lost to USC, consecutive losses to Florida State to open the year. And I don't know if it's the best to put this much pressure on your team and know that this thing's looming over you, right? It's Cincinnati Bengals light. When you're talking about you better get off to a good start. You've gotten off to these poor starts every year. You know, death taxes and LSU losing an opening game to a really big opponent. Having said that, like I'm kind of a big Garrett Nussmeier guy. Like I think that this offense can be very, very good. When you're talking about the upside with Nussmeier and the seal position talent that they have coming back, and overall, I choose to believe in the upside of LSU. Like we're going to have our money moves top 25, and we're eventually going to get to LSU at some point. Spoiler. I think if I remember correctly, I was maybe a little bit higher on them than you were, because I do think the upside of this team can be very, very good, like win the SEC good if all the things hit right for them.
I like Brian Kelly as a head coach. I think that Clemson also, as you mentioned, those rankings, which, by the way, we are going to continue to unveil a little bit later on in the show. We did 2 yesterday. We'll do 2 more today. But this is a Clemson team that a lot of people think could be among the best, if not the best teams in the entire country. So if they were to lose that game, I don't necessarily think that's a crusher for them this year. It's probably very, very possible, actually. Yeah. So if they win that game, I think that's going to tell us a lot about actually where LSU truly is. Brian Kelly is very confident in his team. He thinks they've got a lot of depth, and I agree with you. I like the quarterback element that they bring back. Again, 8.5, that season win total. Okay.
I'll just say really quickly, too, if you look at the schedule, the road games are going to be pretty tough for them, right? At Ole Miss, at Alabama, at Oklahoma, which actually might be kind of good. And let us not forget how good Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt were in the underdog role, and you got to go out there as well.
And I was going to say, that's the thing. You assume that LSU is going to handle business in Death Valley and Baton Rouge. So it's those road games that you have to figure out how are they going to perform in these tough venues, and are they going to handle business like they need to? So I assume home will be fine. It's the road games that are the concern. Speaking of Diego Pavia, let's go to Vanderbilt here, who was able to secure that extra year of eligibility, said he feels that team from last year that went from a 2-win team, by the way, in 2023, 7-6 last year, had that massive win against Alabama. Their projected win total tells you what the market thinks of them at 6.5, although he claims to have eyes on a national title. What do you think about that number?
Okay, so this is actually somewhat equivalent to what we were just talking about, where, you know, when you're talking about players and you hear, you know, the guy's just a gamer, right? That just kind of tells me there's no real like statistical backup for, hey, this is a good player. But Pave is actually the exception to the rule there. He's a gamer, and he's actually pretty good when you're looking at everything. Added nearly 1,000 yards rushing, what they did through the air. I feel like this team might be a little overvalued heading into this year. I'm just going to be curious of what the effect is going to be from last season, because bettors tend to remember, the market tends to remember how a team performed. And as we alluded to, as an underdog, this team was great. But is there going to be this upgrade for a group that has some talent coming back, specifically at the most important position, but not really the most talented team in the SEC, and might actually find itself, despite having just a win total of 5.5, being somewhat overvalued as we head into this year?
Yeah. Plus 130 to the over.
Yeah.
On that 5.5 win total. Ole Miss, meanwhile, was on the cusp of the CFP last year, but a 3-loss record in the SEC wasn't good enough. Now you got Jackson Dart off to the NFL, but Austin Simmons stepping into the QB1 role. Kiffin said he's confident as ever in this year's group. Quote, "We're going to win. We're going to have first-round picks. We're going to have the most players drafted in school history and win 11 games this season." Ole Miss wins total is 8.5. Are they going to win 11 games this year?
So I think Ole Miss, I don't know how I think you did have them ranked. So we had 4 teams in totality in our top 25 when we put them together. You had 2 teams that were ranked that I did not, and then I had 2 that were ranked, vice versa. Ole Miss was one of the teams that I think I ended up not ranking. I just don't know what to do with them. And I think Ole Miss is actually a perfect example of where I struggle with preseason evaluation of some teams. Dude, they lose a ton from last year. How am I supposed to realistically evaluate what this team is going to be? You can have your thoughts of what they potentially could be, but I just don't know, because I have not seen a vast majority of this roster all together as a team. So I can understand, because Lane Kiffin's did a great job with almost every single one of the teams that he's had, that there's probably a floor that this team is going to achieve almost every single time. But in terms of asking them to win 9 games, projecting them to what they're going to be, to me, I have trouble seeing where this Ole Miss team is eventually going to land.
And I do think it's fair, like the doubt that people have with Ole Miss because they didn't hit the portal nearly as hard as they did in the past. But I feel like Lane Kiffin has proven that he can put a good team on the field and he can figure it out as a head coach. So I lean over the 8.5, and it's juiced to minus 140 for a lot of those reasons. I did have them as a top 25 team, but we'll see when the actual rankings come out where they sit.
I would assume that they're probably going to be a top 25 team just because the SEC.
South Carolina was a team that I had in my top 25 too that I don't think you did. That I am a believer in the Gamecocks, and I mentioned this with Bear last segment too. I think that if things go right for them and they do have a challenging schedule, that they can take that next step and be a CFP team. CFP, like, to make the field of 12. I'm not thinking they're going to be an actual contender. There's tiers to this thing. Mm-hmm. But because I think that, and because I think they can win 10 games, that's why I like Lenora Sellers so much for Heisman candidacy.
I let you infect my thought process. I did rank South Carolina.
You did?
Yes, in our top 25. So they are, I would actually, I don't want to ruin anything. I believe they're a top 20 team according to Money Moves. Yeah.
Look at us.
Maybe. I can't remember.
Just look at it.
Yeah.
On that note, we got to take a quick timeout. We will have more college football a little bit later on, as we mentioned the update on those rankings. But when we return, we've got more MLB All-Star action and the WNBA coming up tonight.
This is Follow the Money on VSiN.
Home Run Derby in the rear view. Cal Raleigh taking home the trophy, chain, and WWE belt yesterday as the home run champ. We look ahead today to
wrestling?
the All-Star game that's in Atlanta. I used to in my youth. I was a big WWF, Stone Cold Steve Austin gal back in the day, but not in my adult life. I was devastated when I found out that wrestling wasn't real. Like, I went through it.
You were 27 at the time?
Shut up.
Yeah.
You're the worst. But when it came out here in Vegas, it seemed like everybody had fun.
Yes.
Did you go? Are you a wrestling person?
No, not at all. I've never been a big wrestling person.
Oh, see, I loved it in my youth. I had like cardboard cutout, life size.
Oh, yeah, no. Never. It was never that. It was never big on that.
No?
The only wrestler I know is Bonesaw from the 2001 hit movie Spider-Man. Remember? Bonesaw is ready. Yeah.
No.
You don't remember that at all?
No.
I got you for 3 minutes. 3 minutes of playtime.
Oh my gosh. I haven't watched that movie in a really long time.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Did I get the year right? 2001? 2001? Really? Did I look at that?
That was like our generation Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah. It was a great movie.
That's the one I always think of. Yeah, to our producer, Brian Ortega in our ear. That's who I always think of as like the real Spider-Man.
Correct. Spider-Man 2, best superhero film of all time. There you go. See, now you got to watch it.
That's it. From the Home Run Derby
And all the people
to...
in the stands with the fake saws, like they were sawing their arms. It's great.
Ay. to the All-Star game today,
Right.
where although yesterday in the Derby we did not see Aaron Judge or Shohei Ohtani, we will, of course, on the field today, and those are your two favorites for the All-Star Game MVP. Ohtani plus 550, Aaron Judge 6-1. Your boy PCA, Pete Crow Armstrong, the third shot on the board at 9-1.
NL MVP.
Did you like anything when you were looking at the board here for All-Star MVP?
I'm going to steal something here, but I think it's a fair trade because Will Hill and I are on the same wavelength with this Summer League future with the Atlanta Hawks, in that I was texting with Will about a couple of things, and one of the things that came up was All-Star Game MVP, and I thought he had a great angle on this, which is maybe looking at some of the longer shots and some of the reserves that actually aren't starting, because Stormy, when they start to get into the game, we're talking about the more high leverage spots for some of these guys, and so maybe you're going to get somebody to come off of the bench and actually perform in a high leverage situation. You know, for example, we don't want to go Alejandro Kirk, but he's one of the reserves, so we'll bring him up. An Alejandro Kirk type, something like that, where a dude might get into the game. It might give you an idea of trying to get into this. Now, there's a good one. Bobby Witt Jr. for Kansas City. He's not a starter this year. He is going to come off of the bench. If you're going to get like a Bobby Witt Jr. into some high leverage situations at 20-1 to potentially get a big knock for the American League, something like that, I think it's worth looking at instead of maybe trying to grasp onto one of these guys at the top. Maybe it's a blowout. Maybe Ohtani just comes up and hits a dinger immediately, and it's something where he's just going to spur on some scoring and whatever. But game total 7. These generally tend to be tight. You're probably going to have some high leverage at bats late. Just look at some of these guys that are coming off some of the reserves and maybe try to find a long shot you can get.
And I think that's the way to play it, too. You could maybe not just a singular long shot either, build a little bit of a portfolio, because the meat of all of the people that are up for All-Star MVP are in that 20 to 35-1 range. Sure. Yes, you have Ohtani and Judge, who are those short single-digit shots, but everything else is 11-1 to 250-1. So you can sprinkle that on a couple of guys and be profitable if you hit something.
Yeah. And I think it's really, at this point right now, obviously, we don't know how the game's going to play out, who's going to come up when. So you are kind of, to an extent, outside of just playing the reserves, throwing a little bit of a dart at the board to see what's going to stick eventually. But getting some, and they're all high-end guys, but getting some of the high-end dudes that are going to be coming off, the Bobby Witt Jr.'s, Ellie De La Cruz, for example, even Matt Olson or Eugenio Suarez, who's been playing very well too. Some of these guys that are come off the bench that have been swinging the bats well, that could, in a high-leverage situation, do something with it. I think that's probably where you're looking.
For the game itself, we talked a little bit earlier in the show about the line move in favor of the National League, and we are out to minus 132, 52% of the bets and 60% of the handle on the NL. As far as the total goes, a lot of love for the over to this point, 78% of bets, 76% of the handle on that over 7, which, good reminder, as always, up on vsin.com for our subscribers. You do get access to these exclusive betting splits from both DraftKings and Circa. So Circa, you get the big bets from professional bettors. DraftKings is going to give you that more broad market perspective. So see the real action, not just the public money, but the types of wagers that move lines. What do you make of that minus 132 price in the NL?
I think it's a little strong, but again, so you're looking at some of the splits and what you're getting back. I want more than, I think, what is it, plus 108 coming back the other side. So yeah, like we talked about when we started the show, I just don't think there's that big of an edge between these two. I think the National League deserves to be favored, but if you're going to start to get to that plus 115 range for the American League by the time we get to first pitch, I think that's worth putting a little on. It's not a team that is devoted talent. It's the All-Stars. And as we discussed, when you look at some of the guys, some of the arms that are coming out that you're going to have to make your way through here with Hunter Brown, Bubic, Crochet, DeGrom, all these guys that the NL is going to have to get through to get scoring opportunities against. I would lean a little bit more in the direction of the AL in that regard. So if it starts to get to that plus 115 range, I think that's a playable price.
All-Star break rolls on. Meanwhile, we're just 2 days away from the WNBA All-Star break as well. We have 2 WNBA games tonight, Fever Sun and Mystic Sparks. A handful more coming up tomorrow. We mentioned the bet splits at vsin.com. Tyler Shoemaker's got an article up right now breaking down these 2 games, and he does it each and every day. But for both games tonight, we have seen some pretty sizable line moves for both. And for anyone who's new to betting the W this summer, this is very par for the course. We see these moves and swings every day. Indiana was out from a 12.5-point favorite to open out to minus 16. The total from 164.5 to as high as 167. I'm seeing 165.5 right now. Then the Sparks, meanwhile, opened up a 4.5-point favorite. We saw a flip of favorites at one point where the Mystics were favored by as much as 2, and now we're back to the Sparks minus 1. Total hasn't moved, though, 165.5. But again, this is pretty standard for the W. not just based on injuries either, just numbers getting put up and hammered one way or the other.
Caitlin Clark going to wake up or what? This is the big one, right? Last 6 games for Caitlin Clark, shooting 14% from 3.
So this is, and I know we have in-pocket plays later, but for anybody who's not going to be joining us at the end of the show, I am on her under 2.5 threes in this game.
Wow, you're going to fade greatness, huh?
Fade greatness. You mentioned just the accuracy from 3-point has gone down since her return. So 5 for 19 from 3 in those 3 games back. She's particularly struggled on the road this year, though. 1 for 28. It's like less than 4% in her 4 road games compared to 39% at home. Now, the Sun do play terrible defense, and the last time she played Connecticut in mid-June, she had 20 points, including 4 of 6 from 3, but that game was also in Indiana. And we've seen this a time or two from Caitlin Clark, real cocky about it throughout, that I think there will be, not that there isn't always, but an added emphasis on her, particularly around the perimeter defensively for the Sun. So I was looking at that under 2.5 for her 3-point prop. But I was also kind of looking at the Connecticut Sun plus the points in here. 16 might be just a little bit too many. I know they're 3-18 on the year, but this is a 10-10 against the spread team. They've covered in 3 in a row because they've had these big spreads that they're facing. We were actually on the air last week, give them credit, when they upset, who was it? Seattle Storm outright as 18-point dogs in that game. So I think they can keep it maybe within the 16. Feels like a pretty appropriate number. So I didn't fire on that as an in-pocket best bet, but I lean that way.
Yeah, I think the interesting matchup is the one with the slightly tighter spread, shockingly enough, with the Mystics on the road against the Sparks. Sparks have been one of the worst cover teams in the WNBA, just 7-13-1 ATS, depending on how you measure closing numbers. And the Mystics sapped a 0-4 streak ATS just the other night. So what you get here from a Mystics team that at one point got a little too high in terms of its market rating against one of the worst cover teams in the WNBA in the Sparks. That dynamic's there. Mystics obviously on the fringes of playoff contention or seeding, so that's going to be pretty big. Sparks, if they can kind of make a run, can get into it as well. So this game also carries some weight. But, you always look for these spots where it's kind of 2 ships passing in the night potentially, where it's the worst cover team versus a team that was potentially a little overvalued but got back on the horse. But the Sparks team has been pretty poor and, in fact, actually pure fade material at this point right now.
Yeah, and I was looking at Tyler Shoemaker's article. His T-Shoe index and rating system has the Sparks actually 9 points worse at home than their away rating, and have covered just once in their last 10 home games, or in their 10 home games this season, rather. So keep that in mind. Last couple minutes here before we hit the break. We mentioned the Summer League game that is in action right now earlier off the top, but were there any other games that caught your eye today? I think we had 7 on the slate.
Yeah, we got a bunch of others. There are some that catch your eye just because of the weight that they hold in the grand scheme of the Summer League, especially if you have some of these futures like I do. OKC is on the road against Orlando. They are about 4.5-4-point favorites, total 176. That thing's actually been bet down 2.5 points on the total. But the Thunder trying to maintain potentially winning this thing, obviously with a roster that has been pretty good for a Summer League standards. Number really hasn't budged, though. I mean, it opened 4.5. The big move has been in the totals we just mentioned. The other is Toronto, a 9.5-point favorite against Denver. Toronto, again, one of the 2-0 teams that is in action today, and whether or not they can maintain their undefeated stretch. Now, again, very likely, considering they're laying 9. But as I jokingly called today is moving day. You get 2 undefeated teams that are playing each other here. OKC and Toronto, both in action later today, too. And just worth throwing out there as well that we've had a pretty big move in Philly and Washington. Washington event opened up 4.5. That is now flipped. Philly is a 1-point favorite with a total that is now 185 later this evening.
So just like we were talking about the line moves in W, some line moves shifting things around in Summer League. The updated score for you right now, Minnesota up 41-33 in Detroit. This closed, 4.5?
Yep.
So keeping tabs on that one as we are still in the first half of that game from Vegas that got us started here. We're going to take a quick timeout. When we come back to the NFL as VSiN's football training camp week rolls on, we're going to look at some of the top running backs entering the 2025-26 season, backs we believe in, and prime fade candidates for season-long props and awards. Stay with us.
This is Follow the Money on VSiN.
Back here on Follow the Money alongside Jonathan Von Tobel, Stormy Buonantony with you inside downtown Las Vegas Circa Resort and Casino. I guess we're inside Circa, in Las Vegas too. It checks out. Anyways, Neither here nor there.
I'm with you.
VSiN's football training camp week rolls on, and excited to dive into some different running backs with a segment we're calling Workhorse or Show Pony. Some backs that had really good seasons a year ago, and whether or not they can live up to those expectations and go over their season-long prop totals or be an interest in the awards market, or a guy we want to stay off of this year. Any player in particular that we have on this list today that we're going to go over that you'd like to dive into first?
Yes,
you're
I
like
would.
very judgy the way you're looking at me right now.
I don't know what you're doing, but we don't have time for this. Saquon Barkley, let's do this thing.
All right.
Very, very excited to dive into what Saquon Barkley could potentially do this year. Rushing yard prop, 1,450.5, minus 110 both sides. Rushing touchdowns, 11.5. Rushing yards leader, you get him at plus 310. Offensive player of the year, plus 650. I think it's a very simple play to go under on the rushing yards for Saquon Barkley. Stormy, I will give you a couple of numbers. First off, how many times do you think Saquon Barkley has gone over that number in his career in the regular season?
Once.
That's correct. It was last year. How many times or how many yards do you think he ran for after contact last year?
Oh, it was a lot.
It was 1,093.
Yeah, it was. I know it was a lot. It was like led the NFL in yards after contact or something
it was
like that. Yeah.
insane. I would think that is somewhat unsustainable. Now, look, 1,400 yards is still a very good season, especially when we talk about from a rushing standpoint. This offensive line's great. You play with a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, your opportunities as a runner are going to be there. But to me, when you're talking about running for as many yards as you did after contact, by the way, averaging over 3 yards per carry after contact, hadn't done that yourself since 2019. I think that this is something where it's just kind of buying on the simple regression. 1,400's a lot when you're talking about rushing yards. And I think under 14, now it's not going to be a fun sweat because he's going to get like every carry, and he's incredible, and he's explosive, so it's not even just after contact you have to worry about. He had also 46 runs of 10 yards or more. It was also by far a career high. But when you look across the board for a guy, my tendency is when you see career high, career high, career high, career high, especially when you talk about a running back in his, going into his, what are we talking about here, ninth year, something like that?
29?
Yeah, like he was drafted, rookie year was 2018. I would tend to go a little bit more, if you want to use it, pessimistic than anything else.
And for those of you running back ageists out there, 29 is getting up there. But
it's the best of the ists.
What I would say, though, and again, yes, 1,450.5 yards is a lot, and he ran for more than 2,000 last year. Only 9 other players in NFL history have done that. It's not exactly the most replicable thing, but he did go from all of those other stats that you're citing, being in offensive line purgatory with the New York Giants during that time, to going to the Philadelphia Eagles that have one of the best and like a gold standard offensive line in the league. So I don't know how much that regression looks like. That's the thing for me that I'm just staying off of this number altogether. That said, to your point on regression coming, I know in our NFL betting guide this year, for those of you who are interested in the fantasy opinions, John Hansen, who's the fantasy guru, did a full write-up where he listed out his underachievers for fantasy this year, and Saquon Barkley is the top guy on his list for that. Speaking of which, our NFL betting guide, of course, out right now, vsin.com/subscribe if you want access to not only the betting guide, which has previews of all 32 teams' best bets from all of our show hosts and guests, player props, projections, all that good stuff. But you get access to everything else at vsin.com, all of the betting tools, and all of our guides throughout the course of the year at vsin.com/subscribe. But I mean, John Hansen is very much in line with your thinking.
Yeah, and let's be clear, because I think there's obviously like the thought of like when you say regression, you're like, you think he's going to stink? No, I don't think he's going to stink. No, he's still
going to be very good.
But you're talking about, again, 1,400 rushing yards is a lot for a running back. It's a very good season. And so to just say, like, yeah, I think he's going to run for less than 1,450 yards and a half, by the way. So even if he falls on 1,450, you still win it. Obviously, you hope that's not the sweat that you get. I just think that there's so many different signs you could point to that there is a real step back here for him. And we'll see if that's ultimately going to be the case. They're going to use him. And so it's going to be a very big sweat for you. But that's the other part too, Stormy. Again, when you talk about career highs, it's not only a career high in terms of success, it's also a career high in terms of total snaps and attempts for him last year. 345.
I'm looking at some of the stuff. He was insane for fantasy. Like yards per carry, yards after contact, as you mentioned, missed tackles, total yards. But that type of season, again, almost impossible to replicate. Also had 13 rushing touchdowns last year, 15 total. That prop at 11.5. probably lean a little to the under on that one as well. Let's go to Joe Mixon. Year one in Houston, went over 1,000 yards, added 11 total touchdowns on the ground, another 300 and a score in the receiving game. He ranked 6th in fantasy running back scoring in PPR formats in 14 games played. Yet market expects those numbers to come down. Remember, Houston did also add Nick Chubb on a one-year deal. Mixon had a couple ankle issues last year that forced him to miss time. This summer, dealing with another foot issue, another 29-year-old as well. What do you think about these numbers?
Yeah, I think that you'd probably go under here as well. Not to be a total pessimist, but you mentioned a couple of the key points. It seems like the Texans could lean a little bit more into the rotation of just bringing in multiple bodies and trying to get some dudes out there. Not only Mixon, you mentioned Chubb. Just getting more people involved here and just to save these guys for what could be a playoff run for what they expect. I think there is going to be a point where we might be looking at Chubb potentially forcing this issue and making this become a almost 50-50, maybe dare we say 60-40 if he's like fully healthy and old Nick Chubb, to the point where Mixon finds himself in a true rotation at running back. And if that's the case, 875.5, I think that's safe to go under. Mixon's a very good running back, but unlike what we were talking about with Saquon Barkley, doesn't have the same explosiveness, right? Only 28 carries of 10 yards or more, only 11 rushes, designed rushes of 15 or more yards. So like there's a lack of explosivity that I think would burn you here, especially in a rotation in a backfield that might have a handcuff, if you will, to use a fantasy term, with Nick Chubb back there.
So 875.5 is that yardage, minus 110 both ways. The rushing touchdowns, he had 11 in 14 games this year. The prop 8.5, yet to your point, it is juiced minus 132 toward the under. Let's go to the Colts. How about your boy Jonathan Taylor? Also played 14 games for Indy last year, compiled 1,431 yards and 11 touchdowns. The prop this year set at 1,200.5, minus 120 to the over. Rushing touchdowns number 9.5, also juiced to that over, minus 115.
Yeah. So I actually think this is going to be pretty interesting, but you go back to, I think it was 2022, where the Giants made it to the playoffs and beat the Minnesota Vikings, if I remember correctly. And that was a good year for Saquon Barkley. I'm going to invoke Saquon Barkley one more time. But the whole point here is having a rushing threat at quarterback, despite the fact that it might not be a good passer, is going to help any running back. And so having a Daniel Jones or an Anthony Richardson, if Jonathan Taylor is going to be the workhorse back that I expect them to be, I think there's a pretty strong case you can make for him to go over the total. I think you might prefer Daniel Jones as a starting quarterback if you're Jonathan Taylor, just because I think he's played full seasons like that. He's done it under Dable. Being able to operate as that dual threat to open up the running game for a guy like him, when there's a threat that the quarterback is going to yank that handoff and then go, I think that really helps out guys. We saw it with Saquon Barkley last year. We saw it with Derrick Henry as well. And I think you could totally see it for a guy like him. And last year, too, you saw it. 1,400 yards on the ground, 367 attempts.
Let's go to Derrick.
303.
Let's go to Derrick Henry.
Why are you laughing?
Who you mentioned, because I'm looking at the numbers here.
Jonathan Taylor?
No, I'm not laughing at Jonathan Taylor. I'm laughing as I go pull up like the yardage numbers for last year that Derrick Henry, how he continues to defy Father Time. Can he do it another year? Finished last season with 1,921 yards, 16 touchdowns on the ground. His yardage prop here, 1375.5 at his age. The prop for touchdowns is at 13.5. What are your expectations for him in this Baltimore Ravens offense that is looking to operate on all cylinders yet again?
I mean, he seems pretty unlike Saquon Barkley, right, where we've kind of had these ebbs and flows in his career with his injuries, whatnot. If you look at his overall profile, Henry's been like rock solid consistent. You look at every single year outside of 2021, in which he only had the 239 snaps played. The guy has been Mr. Consistent all the way through since his third year in the league. I'd be more prone to still bank on the long in the tooth running back like Henry in this offense to go over some of these numbers. But to your point about the rushing touchdowns, look, the opportunity is going to be there. I just think this market's priced pretty tightly. Like, you don't have that much room for margin when you're talking about 13.5 and to go over. Because last year he had 16. The opportunities are going to be there, but you're going to have a high rate of success on those opportunities, if you know what I'm saying. I feel like you could lean a little bit over, but I don't think there's that much room to work with there. So I think we're pretty accurately priced across the board, outside of maybe leaning over, just because, again, look at the spike in his numbers last year, all because he was in this system with Lamar Jackson, and what it means to have a running threat like Jackson there with you.
Real quick before the break, only 30 seconds, but I know a lot of people looking through the NFL betting guide are very high on Bijan Robinson this year. Would you agree?
I think, in a vacuum, yes. I think that he is a offensive player of the year candidate. I don't think it's just from a rushing standpoint, though. I think that's
it's
just
tool utilization.
The whole kit and caboodle, if you will, right? Touches out of the backfield, running it, everything like that. I think they're just going to use him a ton. So if we're talking about rushing props, things like that, I wouldn't be there. But offensive player of the year, I think he's totally viable.
Again, reminder, the NFL betting guide out and available now, vsin.com/subscribe. But our early bird pricing ends July 31st. So get in there while you can to get the discounted $175 betting guide and subscription in total.